What did we learn? Now that we're at the finish line, we learned this was complicated. Part of it, of course, was just so wonderful. The scenes, the togetherness, the march in Toronto, the march is in Vancouver, the watch parties nationwide, gathering and uniting over the game for a once-in-a-lifetime event on home soil. We learned how momentous the occasions were, Laren's historic first goal and the explosion of joy in the stadium with it, scoring 6 against Qatar, Eustachio's winning strike. But more than that, we learned how people couldn't get enough. How you'd go into a coffee shop or be waiting for the bus, out for a walk, and everyone was talking soccer. We learned how people's tones shifted when they spoke of Kone, the way their voices rose with anticipation, hoping this would be the day they'd see Davies. We learned over this last month that the roller coaster ride the national team took us on will leave an imprint, no matter how big or small our fandom of the game may be. But remember, we learned this is complicated. We learned that as wonderful as a round of 16 run is, we need to be real on what it was. Morocco scored more goals in the second half on Saturday than Canada did in the 3 previous matches combined. We learned we aren't yet in the caliber of the elite. We learned we can't count on Jonathan David to be a reliable scorer. Now 8 World Cup starts on the resume, has scored in only one of those games. We learned the starting 11 decisions remained an adventure, that in the last 2 matches, neither made a ton of sense. We learned pulling the trigger on substitutions just took too long. And we learned 7 earned every minute of wearing the captain armband. We learned of the obsession to control narratives and the public message. Decoy wasn't it. That Canada was the better team on Saturday. You'd rather be in our spot than Morocco's? Those were just bizarre. And we learned we never quite learned what the deal was with Alphonso Davies. The will he or won't he? For how many minutes? The MRI came back clean, but wasn't right to play? Were the riches of club football too attractive to go? We learned we'll likely never know. What did we learn? We learned 2026 was very Canadian, that everyone played a part, both inside of the stadium and out of it. We learned how we can agree with Eustachio that this team gave it everything they had, and at the same time, we learned how that wasn't enough at this level. And we learned there is work to do to become a true football nation, from the discourse around team stakeholders to a pair of professional MLS franchises with their futures in doubt. We learned we need to find a way to parlay all that came with this summer into something real and sustainable. We learned in 2026 that yes, they may very well be true heroes in our country. And we learned we have so much more to do to take the necessary and vital steps ahead if we are truly to become a world power.
This is Our House, presented by Samsung. Arash with some strong words there. I spoke to Arash today. He's had quite the day through his social media posts and comments and talking to Amy Walsh on certain podcasts. Some good points being made there, though. Dubs, let's start with you. He says we cannot rely on Jonathan David in these games, in these tournaments. Do you agree?
Yeah, it sounded harsh when Arash said it, but I think ultimately, he's right. I think Jonathan David, his run of form for Canada recently, his run of form at club, all of it together is troubling and concerning. He does not look like himself. And I was never a striker. I was a ball-winning midfielder. I got my kind of aura and my confidence up on crunching tackles. When you're a striker, you're measured by how you fill the net and your first touch and putting yourself in the box, putting yourself in dangerous areas so that you can finish and you can deliver for your team in those big moments. And he just did not look himself when he missed a sitter out 13 yards from the net, just above that penalty spot versus Bosnia. He was a shadow of himself versus Morocco. The only time he looked like he had the rhythm, like he had everything kind of lining up for him to score goals when he got the hat trick versus a 9-player Qatar, right? And I don't think that's a true litmus test for somebody who's meant to be your talisman. So Jesse Marsch calls him his most intelligent footballer. We can have an argument about whether or not he's playing the right spot on this team, but he was a guy that Canada needed to rely upon. And in those first 45 minutes where I think Canada looked like themselves, they looked at their best, they needed somebody who was going to be ruthless, and usually that person is Jonathan David, and he did not show up at this World Cup.
Wills, strikers are weird creatures, right? They are. It's all confidence. They have dips. They could have an off season, then bounce back with a prolific season. How concerned are you about John David's recent form? It's been over a year now.
Well, it's a great point. Jonathan David is particularly streaky. He's been that way over the course of his club career. He's just provided over time like a certain level of consistency that we've grown accustomed to with Canada. Like 42 goals for Canada is great, but 8 goals for Juventus this season. And the dip in form for the national team coincided with the start of last season. I remember in the summer friendlies, even through the Gold Cup, I felt like at times Jonathan David was unplayable. He was in the form of his life. He looked fit. Every touch, every run that he made was with purpose. This was a great goal here. This was the last goal he scored from open play before the World Cup against Qatar. Other than that, it was 2 penalties against Iceland, and he was largely ineffective. I think it's a player where 2 things happened. One is club form trickled into his national team form. Like clearly it didn't work out. It was a miserable season at Juventus where he was in and out of the team. He failed to adjust. The team wasn't having a whole lot of success. Juventus changed their manager. There was a lot working against him. Oh yeah. And they also played one up top and there was 3 strikers that the team was trying to rotate through. And really none of them had a really great campaign in 25-26. Then for the national team, and Amy hinted at it, I still don't think that Jonathan David's playing the right position. We're seeing him back defending his own end on top of his own 18-yard box. I want him forward. I want him closer to the goal. I want him making runs in behind the back line. But that has really been the job of whoever his strike partner is. Jonathan David is being relied upon to be someone who is a presser, a defensive cog, a facilitator. He is none of these things. So I don't think the national team was playing to his strength either. So perhaps if one of these issues, whether it was just club or just country, you could kind of like push one aside and maybe he could push through and thrive through the situation. But both of them combined have put him in a real difficult place. That Jonathan David that we saw at that World Cup, whether it was touch on the ball, his confidence, his inability to read the game, that wasn't him. So something has to change going into the next campaign. So the next big game for Canada, he's in a much better position than he was over the course of the last month.
It's a fascinating topic, this, formations, tactics, where to use them. Jesse Marsch, talks about how smart a player he is. He's got the best IQ of any footballer he's ever coached before. Maybe in that regard, he overthinks it a little bit and he puts John David in positions where maybe he's not best utilized, but he can do a job. When you talk about the next games coming up, next couple of windows, Wheels, do you see a formation change? I mean, we can see a player like Marcelo Flores, who's missed the World Cup, real shame there. But the kind of player that could play in that creative number 10 hole if he ever John David up top, getting on the end of those passes.
Is Jesse Marsch going anywhere? If the answer is no, then I don't think anything's going to change. I mean, I couldn't believe in the build up to this World Cup, there wasn't even a little bit of experimentation on what that would look like. He was so resolute in his idea that Jonathan David was going to play that role and be his number 10 that we didn't even get to see what it would look like if someone else played the position. And I understand, I get it, that maybe Canada hasn't been blessed with options for players playing in that area. I still think that Ismail Kone could have pushed a little bit forward and you could have at least tried him in that role. But when Flores came in that final window, preparation window against Iceland and Tunisia, and he didn't play that role, then that told us, I think, everything that we needed to know about what he thinks about Jonathan David and where he should play, or perhaps what he thinks about the rest of the group and where they should play. So in the immediate future, because of the status of Flores is going to be out for a long time and the lack of players being able to step up and play that role, I don't think anything's going to change, James. Do I think it should? Yes. But do I think it will? Absolutely not.
Yeah, and I think that, we think about Jesse Marsch and the style that he espouses, the philosophy of play that he's instilled here in Canada, and the players in a player pool, it's really playing to their strengths. But we think of it as a flat 4-4-2 and then like a 4-2-2-2 when they're defending and variations on that. I see it more as like a 4-2-3-1, but we never really see that fully come to life. And I think that's to do with the personnel. Like Wheels brought up the point about Kone. Like I think a lot of people, if you're going to push Jonathan David up, he's a type of guy, even though Marsch sees him more as a box to box, or at least in his mind, that's where he sees his strengths and like him playing the best football he can. He's in that role. But I don't know if we have the personnel. Like, what are we doing in our development system? Sharms, you alluded to Jesse Marsch looking forward and like trying to align the pathway, the youth development teams, and then shepherding those players along, playing a similar style. He's going to be with the U20s, looking forward to the Olympics. So you're developing players that can fit in there. So you might want to give them a little bit of flexibility, but you're also playing the best formation for the players in front of you. So he looks at Jonathan David and he thinks, my system needs to be built around this guy. And it means that he's moved away from the net. And I really do think it's to the detriment of the team. So if maybe over the next cycle, we're looking ahead to 2030, there are players who are going to come to the fore. There are likely more dual nationals that are going to be recruited by Jesse Marsch, because that has been a huge part of the 2 years that he's been with this team. So maybe, there's somebody on the horizon that can play that role. And then all of a sudden, Jonathan David is playing a true number 9. Because if we did have somebody who was ruthless, who was that lethal finisher, like a Holland, like a Kane, I don't even think you throw Lionel Messi in there because he's just a unicorn, but somebody who's an out-and-out number 9, whether you're an old school forward or just somebody who can do the job to fill the net, we wouldn't be having this discussion. What they've done so far is enough. So you need the personnel to be able to plug those holes so you're not doing square peg, round holes.
Yeah, the elusive number 10 or 9, right? That Achilles heel of Canadian soccer, the unicorn of Canadian soccer, as it were. How about some more domestic football? This Wednesday, July the 8th, the Canadian Championship quarterfinals get back into action. And listen, if we're a football nation, we fill these stadiums, right? Let's continue this momentum from the World Cup, people, and show up for the Canadian Championship.